The millionaire called his pregnant wife boring in front of his mistress. Then she bought out his business that night. They say you never truly know what someone is capable of until they're backed into a corner. For Isabella Warren, a devoted wife expecting her first child, that moment came when her wealthy husband, Ryan, humiliated her in the most unforgivable way, calling her boring in front of his glamorous mistress at a crowded gala. Everyone whispered, some even laughed, but no one truly understood what Isabella had hidden behind her gentle demeanor. Before the night was over, she would orchestrate a move so bold it would leave everyone in shock, because in a single defiant stroke, Isabella Warren set out to rewrite her destiny. From the outside looking in, Isabella Warren lived a fairy tale life. Born Isabella Montgomery, she came from a modest background in small-town Georgia. Through hard work, unwavering determination, and a keen business sense inherited from her grandfather, who once ran a successful trucking company, she'd gained acceptance to a top-tier business school. It was there, at a Harvard alumni event, that she met Ryan Warren, the young millionaire scion of Warren and Moore Holdings. With striking blue eyes and a confident swagger, Ryan had been the ultimate catch. A few months into their whirlwind romance, they married in a private ceremony on Martha's Vineyard. Society pages gushed over the union, calling it the perfect match of promise and pedigree. Isabella soon discovered that while Ryan adored life's grand stage, expensive suits, exclusive clubs, nights at the Ritz-Carlton, he had little patience for her quieter dreams. She liked reading about global economic trends. She wanted to start philanthropic ventures for pregnant women in need, and she sought meaning in every chance encounter. Meanwhile, Ryan thrived on adrenaline. He led his father's empire in property development and tech investments. He lived for the chase stock market highs, new acquisitions, and the dopamine rush of sealing multi-million-dollar deals in glass-walled boardrooms. As the years wore on, that sparkle of early marriage lost its luster. While Ryan hit new peaks, expanding Warren and Moore's portfolio from New York to Singapore, Isabella often felt like she was simply an accessory invited to stand beside him for photo ops, but never truly included. Whenever she voiced her insights, he'd brush them off with a smirk. "That's cute, Isa," he'd say in a patronizing tone, ignoring the fact she'd spent hours researching the viability of an international expansion. One of her biggest regrets was not continuing her own separate professional path. Ryan had urged her to focus on the home, citing he preferred the traditional route of having a supportive wife. Loving him deeply at the time, she acquiesced, in hopes of making him proud. They lived in a breathtaking penthouse on Park Avenue, complete with marble floors, a private elevator, and an indoor garden that Isabella painstakingly nurtured. Despite the extravagance, Isabella struggled with a certain restlessness. She craved genuine connection, a sense of partnership. Her pregnancy, an unplanned but welcome surprise, was supposed to bond them. She imagined it might bring them closer, especially as Ryan had always talked about building a legacy. Yet rather than leaning in, Ryan drifted further away. Board meetings in London turned into spontaneous trips to Dubai. Late-night calls, cryptic text messages, and rumors of his wandering eye reached Isabella's ears. She tried to dismiss them as idle gossip, but a part of her suspected the truth: she was losing him. Now, with their baby due in 4 months, Isabella yearned for stability. She hoped they could become a team, focus on building a family as well as an empire. Instead, Ryan's scornful attitude often surfaced. He'd toss out remarks like, "All you do is read baby blogs," or "You wouldn't understand the thrill of this deal." She never expected her illusions to shatter in such a public and humiliating way, but life has a way of revealing the truth, sometimes in the harshest of spotlights. Ryan Warren's love for high society galas was legendary. He thrived in the swirl of crystal champagne flutes, elegant ball gowns, and whispered deals made between canopies. So, when an exclusive fundraiser at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was announced, backed by major names like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and even the philanthropic arm of the Rockefeller family, Ryan made sure they were invited. Isabella initially hesitated about attending. At 5 months pregnant, she felt heavier and more self-conscious than usual. However, Ryan insisted, claiming the event would be an opportunity to show solidarity and let everyone know we're still a power couple. Behind the shimmering facade of the gala's theme, Renaissance opulence, something darker lurked for Isabella. Rumors had reached her of a new woman in Ryan's life. Her name fluttered on the lips of acquaintances at the country club, Genevieve Santorini, a supposed business partner from Milan. The few details Isabella managed to glean about Genevieve painted a portrait of a vivacious, striking beauty with a taste for couture, known for hosting lavish parties in Lake Como. Even so, Isabella couldn't fathom how brazen Ryan had become, bringing Genevieve to New York, parading her around in circles that Isabella also inhabited. Was he underestimating the rumor mill entirely? Or did he simply not care anymore? As the gala commenced, wealthy patrons ambled through the museum halls, sipping champagne and discussing their philanthropic endeavors. Isabella walked beside Ryan, wearing a floor-length, midnight blue gown that skimmed her growing belly elegantly. She had her hair pinned up, pearls glistening at her neck, determined to keep her composure. For a moment, she almost believed this evening might pass without drama. Then she caught a glimpse of Genevieve across the room. The woman was taller than Isabella, her dark hair styled in soft waves cascading past her shoulders. Dressed in a form-fitting sequined gown, she stood out like a diamond among rubies. Laughing with her was Carter Green, a hedge fund magnate who occasionally partnered with Ryan. Isabella watched as Carter discreetly signaled to Ryan. Within seconds, Ryan was drawn away from Isabella's side, leaving her standing alone in a swirl of glittering patrons. Anxious thoughts churned in Isabella's mind. She wondered how on earth Ryan could be so callous. Did he plan to introduce Genevieve to the same social circle that had, up until now, recognized Isabella as Miss S. Warren? Isabella's heart pounded. She followed Ryan at a distance, weaving through the crowd until she overheard him bragging to Carter and Genevieve about a newly closed deal in South Asia. Ryan's face glowed with excitement, his posture relaxed in a way Isabella realized he rarely showed around her anymore. Then it happened. Isabella stepped a little too close enough for them to notice her. Carter muttered a polite greeting, but Genevieve only flashed a cunning smile. Ryan stiffened, an expression of annoyance crossing his face. He half-turned toward Isabella, as though she were an afterthought, and uttered the words that would shatter her heart. "Don't mind her, she's gotten so boring ever since she got pregnant." A hush fell over the small group. Even Carter's eyebrows rose in discomfort. Genevieve smirked, sipping her champagne. The band in the distance kept playing, and laughter from other guests filtered through. But in that moment, Isabella felt as if the world had ground to a halt, her cheeks heated with embarrassment. That single word, boring, cut deeper than she could have anticipated. Isabella blinked back tears and forced a polite nod. She refused to crumble in front of these people, refused to give Ryan or Genevieve the satisfaction of seeing her break. Mastering what dignity she could, she excused herself and walked away. But even as she retreated to the powder room, she felt an entirely different heat rising inside her. She didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the turning point of her entire life. Isabella was no stranger to disappointment, but the public nature of Ryan's betrayal was an agony unlike any she'd known. Retreating to a quiet alcove near the museum's courtyard, she tried to calm her trembling hands. Her baby bump felt heavier, a physical reminder of the life growing within a life that would one day know the truth of its father's cruelty if she didn't break free from this cycle. No tears came. Instead, a fierce resolve began to take root. Isabella recalled her grandfather's words, "People will think you're soft, Bella, because you're kind. Show them that kindness isn't weakness." She took a steadying breath, channeling that old sense of determination. Soon enough, an unexpected ally approached her. Thomas Patterson, a retired venture capitalist and longtime family friend, had witnessed the cringe-worthy exchange. His silver hair gleamed under the delicate lights, and concern etched lines across his forehead. "Isabella," he said in a hushed voice, "whatever's going on with Ryan, you don't deserve that." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, Thomas," she murmured, "but I have to figure out how to handle this." He hesitated before speaking again. "I know tonight might not be the best time, but there's something I've been meaning to share with you. I've watched you for years, how you conduct yourself, your intelligence, your business acumen. I'm no fortune teller, but I've seen how Ryan underestimates you. If you're ever ready to branch out, to make a move of your own, I might have an opportunity." A flicker of curiosity lit up her eyes. "An opportunity?" He nodded slowly. "There's a private equity fund forming. Names like Valeria Montgomery, Ramaya's private equity. Even some old colleagues from Morgan Stanley are involved. They're looking for a strategic partner, someone with vision. I thought you might be interested." Isabella felt her heart skip. She never considered that she could be more than just Miss S. Warren, especially under the shadow of her husband's empire. Still, the pieces began to fall into place in her mind. Maybe she was allowed to dream bigger than being second fiddle in Ryan's show. And maybe she was more than boring. Thomas gave her his card. "Let's talk soon." Away from watchful eyes, she hid the card in her clutch, just in time. The familiar scent of expensive cologne signaled Ryan's approach. She looked up, noticing his forced smile. "There you are," he said through clenched teeth, trying to maintain an appearance of marital harmony in front of any onlookers. "People are asking for us." Isabella slipped her arm through his, let him guide her back into the main hall, but she felt no warmth from him. Instead, she was replaying his mocking words, "Boring, boring, boring." He'd hammered that label into her soul, and now it echoed in her head like a battle drum, pushing her toward a bold new frontier. She spent the rest of the gala on autopilot, politely smiling through tedious conversations, half listening to Ryan's bragging about future business expansions, scanning the crowd for Genevieve's smug visage. A small part of her wanted to tear that woman's illusions apart. Another part recognized that Genevieve was only a symptom of Ryan's disregard for his wife's worth. The real problem was the man at her side, Ryan Warren, who believed he owned the world and had no qualms about disrespecting the mother of his unborn child. By the time the event wrapped up, with the orchestra playing its final waltz, Isabella had decided that she would no longer be sidelined. If Ryan thought her dull, if he could humiliate her without fear of consequences, he was about to learn how very wrong he was. For months, she had reined in her intelligence, her ambition, all for the sake of preserving their marriage. But that night, the seeds of her defiance took root. She would use every resource, every connection, and every bit of cunning she had. And though she had no idea just how drastically life would change by dawn, Isabella felt one thing deep in her core. She was done playing the docile wife. The Warren penthouse was usually quiet in the early hours of the morning, perched high above the city where traffic noise rarely penetrated. But on this particular night, Isabella's mind buzzed like Grand Central Station at rush hour. She changed out of her gown, letting it pool on the floor before stepping into a comfortable robe. Despite the plush surroundings, Italian velvet drapes, antique sculptures, a crystal chandelier, she felt no comfort in her lavish home. Ryan was locked away in his study, probably reviewing business reports or texting Genevieve. At least, That's what Isabella suspected. The fact that he hadn't even tried to apologize after the gala stunned her. Then again, maybe she shouldn't have been surprised. Ryan thrived on control, and an apology would mean acknowledging fault. There, in the soft glow of a single lamp, Isabella withdrew Thomas Patterson's business card. She turned it over, reading the phone number and email address. Could she dare risk a meeting? She wasn't so naive as to think Ryan wouldn't notice if she started exploring outside ventures. But she also realized this might be her single chance to create a safety net for herself and her unborn child. She slipped the card into the hidden lining of her jewelry box, a place Ryan would never think to look. Resolute, she made herself a cup of chamomile tea. Her baby kicked softly, almost as though in agreement. "Don't worry," she murmured, placing a gentle hand over her belly. "We'll be fine. Mama's got this." Before she could dwell on her next steps, her phone vibrated. A text message flashed from her best friend, Charlotte Liang. Charlotte was a boutique fashion designer who had studied with Isabella back in business school. She had a knack for sniffing out drama before it even made the tabloids. "I heard what happened tonight. Are you okay?" The simple question nearly dissolved Isabella's composure. Tears stung her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She typed back, "I will be. Let's meet tomorrow at the palace for lunch." As she sent the message, she overheard Ryan's footsteps. She tensed, half expecting him to barge in and pick a fight. Instead, he merely walked past the open doorway with barely a glance. She heard him mutter something about an overseas call, and that was it. No good night, no concern, nothing. Slipping into bed, Isabella thought back to the vow she had made earlier. She wasn't going to be a pawn in Ryan's life anymore, but she also needed to be strategic. If she confronted him head-on about the affair without a plan, he would bulldoze her, or at least try to. As she closed her eyes, a swirl of possible strategies filled her mind. Maybe she could gather financial intel. Maybe she could meet with Thomas Patterson in secret. Maybe she could launch a business with Charlotte. The details were still hazy, but one thing was clear. She needed a plan that outsmarted Ryan at his own game. The night wore on, and sleep came in fits. Dreams morphed into nightmares of empty bank accounts and cold boardrooms. Yet every time her child stirred within her, she felt a surge of courage. She clung to one thought: she wasn't alone in this fight. Her unborn baby was with her, and that was reason enough to stand strong. The next day, at the Lotte New York Palace's elegant cafe, Isabella and Charlotte sat at a table near a towering floral arrangement. The soft chatter of affluent clientele created a gentle hum. Waiters, dressed in crisp uniforms, glided between tables. For a moment, the grand decor reminded Isabella of her old dreams. Dreams of forging an empire alongside Ryan, building philanthropic efforts, traveling the world. Now, those visions felt tarnished. Charlotte reached across the table, gently clasping Isabella's hands. "Spill it. Tell me everything," she said, concern laced with a fierce loyalty that had always buoyed Isabella's spirits. Isabella recounted the gala humiliation, Ryan's dismissive comment, and the painful certainty that he was having an affair with Genevieve Santorini. Charlotte's eyes flared. "That's beyond cruel. Does he even realize how lucky he is? He doesn't care," Isabella admitted, swirling her untouched coffee. "But I'm done being his doormat. Last night changed everything." Charlotte nodded slowly. "You have resources, Isa. You're not some unskilled trophy wife." A faint smile curved Isabella's lips. "I may have more resources than you think." She proceeded to tell Charlotte about Thomas Patterson's offer. "He wants me on board with a new private equity fund. I don't have every detail, but if I play my cards right, I could build something powerful, maybe even outmaneuver Ryan if he tries to leave me high and dry." Sounds like a plan, Charlotte said, taking a sip of her tea. But Ryan is cunning. Don't let him see it coming. Gather information, especially about his finances. Men like him think they can hide their tracks, but they always slip up somewhere. Isabella exhaled. You're right. I need to be strategic. Ryan never gave me a formal role at Warren and Moore, but I have some access logins, passcodes, older financial statements. If I carefully look through them, I might find something. Just be cautious, Isa, Charlotte warned. He's not going to take kindly to you having any leverage. They chatted more about the future, about the baby, and about the prospect of independence. Then, as they were finishing dessert, Charlotte's expression turned hesitant. There's something else you need to know. Word on the street is that Ryan's next big deal involves shady partnerships in Eastern Europe. My friend who works at the Department of Justice mentioned something about potential legal implications. If Ryan's stepping into muddy waters, it could crumble the entire Warren and Moore empire. A chill ran down Isabella's spine. If Ryan was delving into questionable territories for higher profits, that meant the foundation of his wealth might be on shaky ground. She realized that if she wanted to protect herself and her child, she needed to act fast. If the government swooped in with investigations, she could be left with nothing unless she had her own fortress of assets. Finishing her cappuccino, Isabella felt an uncharacteristic surge of adrenaline. The once shy woman who allowed her husband to overshadow her was awakening, replaced by someone with a keen survival instinct. She looked at Charlotte, a determined glimmer in her eyes. I'm going to accept Thomas's offer, she said, and I won't just survive Ryan's betrayal, I'll rise above it. Charlotte lifted her teacup in a mock toast. To your victory, then. They clinked cups softly. In that moment, Isabella felt the winds of change swirl around her. She still had to figure out the details, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope flickering in her chest like a lighthouse beacon guiding her through the storm. That afternoon, Isabella returned to the penthouse, greeted only by silence and the faint hum of the city below. Ryan had left a note on the kitchen counter, an impersonal message explaining he'd be in meetings until late. She felt a mixture of relief and resentment. At least his absence provided her the time she needed to dig deeper. She headed straight to the Home Office. Though Ryan had his own study, he rarely ventured into the smaller office Isabella used for personal correspondence and philanthropic planning. She slid open the laptop, entered a password she knew Ryan used for lesser accounts, an old family dog's name spelled backward. Lucky for her, Ryan was arrogant enough not to change his passwords often. Her heart pounded as she clicked through Warren and Moore Holdings' internal server, rummaging in the digital archives. She looked for any hint of the rumored Eastern Europe deal. Sure enough, in a folder labeled Overseas Developments Q4, she unearthed a subfolder titled Confidential Derrick Projects. The documents, though riddled with financial jargon, revealed partnerships with shell companies. Isabella recognized enough to see they were funneling funds through lesser-known territories, raising red flags for money laundering or sanctions violations. She didn't understand every nuance, but she understood enough. Ryan was playing with fire. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her tension. She inhaled slowly, steeling herself. Instead of panicking, she methodically downloaded the files onto a USB drive. If the Department of Justice, or SEC, launched an investigation, these documents could be key. If nothing else, they would leverage a card she could play if Ryan tried to ruin her financially or deny her child support. She was so engrossed in her discovery that she almost didn't notice her phone vibrating. Thomas Patterson's name lit up the screen. She answered quietly, her voice hushed. "Isabella, good to hear from you," Thomas said. "I hope last night didn't weigh you down too much." She forced a light laugh, though her nerves were frayed. "It's definitely put things into perspective." "About your offer, can we meet?" Thomas paused, then answered, "Certainly. How about tomorrow at my office on Fifth Avenue? My associates will be there, but we can talk privately first. That's perfect, Isabella replied, feeling her resolve crystallize. After the call, she ejected the USB drive, stashing it in a concealed compartment in her closet. She locked the office, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Every step she took down the hallway felt like crossing a bridge she could never return from. Yet, she felt empowered for the first time in years. That night, she carefully laid out her outfit for the meeting, an elegant but conservative dress that conveyed seriousness. Then she tried to sleep, though sleep wouldn't come easily. She kept envisioning the confrontation that might loom with Ryan. How would he react if he knew she'd uncovered his secrets? What would happen when she eventually filed for divorce, or if she decided to stand her ground in his business world? Yet a quiet strength settled in her, nurtured by the life moving inside her belly. She reminded herself that she was no longer just living for herself, but for her child, and that thought gave her the courage she needed. By dawn, Isabella Warren had made her decision. She would no longer be boring, subdued, or overshadowed. She was going to carve out her own destiny, no matter the cost. Thomas Patterson's office on Fifth Avenue overlooked Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sweeping view of lush greenery against the steel and glass skyline. Isabella felt a sense of awe as she stepped inside the polished reception area. Large, abstract paintings adorned the walls, and the scent of fresh lilies filled the air. A stylish receptionist escorted her to a private conference room where Thomas waited, accompanied by two other individuals, Valeria Montgomery, a poised woman in her mid-40s with an impressive track record in tech investments, and David Ramirez, founder of Ramirez Private Equity. Both greeted Isabella warmly. She sensed curiosity in their eyes, as if they wondered how this Warren wife might contribute to their venture. Thomas introduced everyone, then suggested they begin with a private conversation between him and Isabella. Valeria and David, exchanging knowing smiles, exited to another room. Once they were gone, Thomas's friendly demeanor shifted slightly to one of serious business. "I've followed your career before you married Ryan," Thomas began, leaning forward. "You were top of your class. Co-led a startup project that later got acquired by a major marketing firm. Then, you seemed to fade from the professional scene. But I always saw potential in you, Isabella." Her heart fluttered at the validation. "I appreciate that. I'm ready to step back into the business world, but I need more details." "What exactly is this fund about?" Thomas nodded. "We're forming a private equity fund aimed at acquiring undervalued tech companies with strong growth potential. We've already identified a handful of targets in Silicon Valley and emerging markets. The plan is to build them up and either go public or sell to larger conglomerates. The returns could be massive." He paused, studying her expression. "But this isn't just about money, is it?" Isabella pursed her lips. "Honestly, no. I need security for my child's future, and I'm worried that Ryan, my husband, may be involved in questionable deals. If the government cracks down on him, I want to have my own resources. I've dedicated years to supporting him, but he's shown me how little he values me." Thomas's eyes softened. "I understand, and I'd like to help. But to do that, I need your expertise. You've got a network of contacts from your Harvard days. You're also a Warren, like it or not. That name opens doors. But I suspect you want to stand on your own 2 feet, not just rely on that name." "That's exactly it," Isabella said. She felt a surge of resolve. "I want to invest, to negotiate, to be involved at the decision-making level." Thomas slid a stack of papers toward her. "This is an initial partner agreement. Read it over. We're prepared to offer you a seat at the table, one of the founding partners. You'll need to invest capital. If that's an issue, we can arrange some creative financing. Valeria and David trust me on this, and I trust you." Isabella scanned the document. The language was straightforward enough. Her role would entail due diligence, business strategy, and an optional buy in over time. It was a chance to build something substantial, something that could outlast any personal turmoil in her marriage. Before she could reply, Thomas added gently, "I won't ask about your personal finances, but if you need help, I can front part of your share. You can repay me later once the fund gains traction." Gratitude welled up within her. "Thank you, Thomas. I believe I can manage." She thought of the hush money Ryan had given her after a minor public scandal last year, money she'd hidden in a separate account. She had once felt guilty about it. Now she saw it as seed capital for her escape. She extended her hand, and Thomas shook it firmly. "Welcome aboard, partner." A tingle of excitement coursed through her. In that moment, Isabella envisioned a future where she no longer cowered under Ryan's shadow, but stood as an equal in the world of high finance. She hadn't yet unveiled the next steps of her plan, but this was the foundation. She knew there would be obstacles: Ryan's anger, the mistress flaunting her presence, possible legal battles. But for the first time since she met Ryan Warren, Isabella felt truly alive. Days turned into a week, and Isabella found a newfound purpose. She spent hours poring over investment proposals, interfacing with Valeria and David, and strategizing how best to cultivate the budding private equity fund. It was invigorating, like rediscovering a part of herself she'd lost after marrying Ryan. Yet it wasn't all smooth sailing. Ryan's mood had grown mercurial, his temper flaring over the slightest inconvenience. He hurled complaints about incompetent staff, slow project timelines, even his tailor messing up his suits. Late-night phone calls with an overseas partner left him irritable. Isabella suspected this had to do with the Derrick projects and the shady dealings in Eastern Europe. She kept her distance, aware that each day the tension in their penthouse thickened. Genevieve Santorini's presence loomed like a dark cloud. Pictures surfaced on social media: Ryan and Genevieve dining at an exclusive restaurant, entering a Broadway show, even sightings at a private lounge. Isabella refused to confront him directly yet. She needed more time to finalize her own position, but each photograph, each mocking commentary in gossip columns ignited a fresh wave of hurt and anger. One evening, she was in the penthouse living room, poring over her new fund's budget forecasts, when Ryan strode in, jacket slung over his arm. He barely offered a greeting before noticing the spreadsheets displayed on her laptop. His brows furrowed. "What are you doing?" She refused to shrink. "I'm reviewing some investment opportunities. I'm considering backing a startup." He barked a humorless laugh. "You? Backing a startup? With what capital? My money?" The derision in his voice was palpable. She calmly closed her laptop. "I have my own resources." He rolled his eyes. "Sure you do. Listen, if you're bored with your pregnant housewife routine, I can understand. But don't try to play in the big leagues, Isabella. This is a world you don't know how to navigate." His words stabbed at her pride, but she remained composed. "You'd be surprised at what I can navigate," she said. "After all, I studied business too." Ryan took a step closer, looming over her. "Don't test me, Isa. I'm juggling enough stress. The last thing I need is you meddling in business you can't handle." A flash of defiance sparked in her eyes. She wanted to fling accusations at him, throw the evidence of his illicit deals in his face, but she held back. Instead, she simply rose from her seat. "We'll see," she said softly, her voice steady. His lips curled in annoyance. For a moment, she thought he might say more, but a phone call interrupted them. He glanced at the caller ID and muttered, "This is important." "Don't wait up," before disappearing into his study. The door slammed behind him. Isabella exhaled, her heartbeat quickening. A swirl of thoughts and emotions raged inside her. She knew a storm was coming. Ryan was suspicious, and Genevieve's hold on him was strong. But instead of feeling fear, Isabella felt a surge of determination. She placed a hand on her belly. If Ryan thought she was boring, he had no idea what she was capable of. The reckoning was only a matter of time. The final blow came at a high-profile charity banquet hosted at the Plaza Hotel, a rival event to the Met Gala, but equally lavish. This time, it was for a children's hospital, and Isabella had contributed a sizable donation in her own name, separate from Ryan's philanthropic efforts. Her plan was to keep building her identity as a capable, independent figure in high society circles. She'd arrived alone, wearing a flowing emerald gown that accentuated her pregnant form rather than hiding it. Heads turned as she walked in. She could sense the curious glances, some likely fueled by the rumors swirling around her marriage. Still, she held her head high. Near the silent auction area, she spotted Ryan with Genevieve. They stood close, speaking in hushed tones. Ryan looked tense, and Genevieve seemed to be coaxing him about something. Isabella felt a pang in her chest, but she refused to wilt under the heartbreak. Instead, she moved gracefully around the banquet hall, greeting acquaintances, making small talk about the charities she was supporting, and subtly hinting that she was involved in an exciting new venture. As dinner concluded, an auctioneer took the stage, encouraging the wealthy patrons to bid on exotic trips, vintage wines, and exclusive art pieces. To Isabella's shock, Ryan and Genevieve waltzed onto the dance floor as the band began a slow tune. It was a brazen display, their bodies too close for a simple work-partner relationship. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some supportive of the gossip spectacle, others pitying Isabella. She stood at the edge, fists clenched, a swirl of rage and humiliation gripping her. The final straw? The moment when Ryan spun Genevieve around, their eyes locked with an intensity Isabella hadn't seen him show in years. No subtlety, no shame. He was effectively announcing to the world that Genevieve was his main companion now. Something inside Isabella snapped. She marched to the stage, motioning for the auctioneer to pause. The crowd hushed. Even Ryan and Genevieve stopped, confusion registering on their faces. Isabella gripped the microphone, her heart pounding like thunder. "I apologize for the interruption," she began, voice quivering yet resolute. "I'd like to increase my pledge to the Children's Hospital to $1 million. A murmur of awe swept through the hall. Isabella continued, "I believe in supporting those in need. It's something dear to my heart as I prepare to become a mother." Her gaze locked with Ryan's. The shock on his face was priceless. He knew that donation was separate from his accounts, from his oversight. A smattering of applause grew, culminating in a standing ovation. Isabella handed the microphone back, stepping off stage to approach Ryan and Genevieve, who stared at her in bewilderment. "Quite a pledge," Ryan muttered. "Where did you get that kind of money?" Isabella smiled serenely. "Don't worry about it." Then she turned to Genevieve, looking her up and down. "Enjoy the dance." With that, she pivoted and walked away, leaving Ryan and Genevieve stunned amidst the swirling crowd. The entire scene felt surreal, a sudden shift of power, a crystallization of her new reality. But Isabella wasn't finished. Tonight was the night she would teach Ryan that she was anything but boring. She'd spent weeks finalizing an intricate plan, and if all went as expected, she would buy out a controlling stake in one of Warren and Moore's critical divisions, an audacious move that would rock Ryan's entire empire. Isabella left the Plaza Hotel immediately after her dramatic pledge. She hailed a black SUV waiting for her at the curb. Inside, Thomas Patterson and Valeria Montgomery were seated, laptops open. Their expressions were tense yet excited. The overhead light illuminated the seriousness of the moment. "Are we all set?" Isabella asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Thomas nodded, looking from his screen to her. "Everything is prepared. The final signatures are ready to go. The capital from our new fund has been allocated as we discussed. Once you approve, we'll execute." The plan was bold: use the newly formed private equity fund, along with Isabella's personal capital, to purchase the majority shares in a key subsidiary of Warren and Moore Anderson Tech. Anderson Tech specialized in cybersecurity solutions and had been a steady revenue generator for Warren and Moore for years. Ryan had overlooked its strategic importance, focusing instead on flashier deals. But Isabella knew better. If she controlled Anderson Tech, she would hold enormous leverage in the industry leverage that could rival Ryan's dominance. Valeria pulled up a digital contract on her tablet. All we need is your final e-signature, Isabella. Once that's done, the shares transfer to our holding entity, which you effectively control. With a trembling hand, Isabella scrolled through the contract's final pages. It was surreal. She was about to orchestrate a hostile buyout of her husband's subsidiary while carrying his child. Her mind flicked to the humiliations she'd suffered, the label of boring that had cut so deeply. This was her stand. She pressed her stylus to the screen, signing her name with quiet resolve. Thomas exhaled in relief, as though they'd just crossed a battlefield. "Congratulations, Isabella. You just took control of Anderson Tech." Valeria tapped her tablet. "Transaction confirmed. We'll issue a press release first thing tomorrow, letting the world know about the buyout. Ryan's lawyers will be in a frenzy." Isabella allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. She glanced at her phone. Messages from the banquet were pouring in, some congratulating her donation, others seeking clarification. She noticed one from Ryan. "Where are you? We need to talk." She ignored it. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as the SUV sped through the city streets. From the tinted window, she watched the skyline flash by, the towering buildings that had once felt like prisons. Now, they seemed like a kingdom she was finally claiming as her own. "Let's call it a night," she said softly. "Tomorrow we face whatever storms come our way." Thomas and Valeria nodded in agreement. She thanked them for their support and stepped out in front of her penthouse building. The doorman politely tipped his hat, opening the door for her. She walked into the marble-floored lobby, clutching her handbag that contained the final legal documents. When she reached her penthouse, she found Ryan there, pacing anxiously. The second he saw her, anger flashed in his eyes. "Where the hell have you been?" he snapped. "And what was that stunt at the banquet? You pledged $1 million as if it was pocket change." She slipped off her coat, meeting his gaze coolly. "I was doing something important. Trust me, you'll hear about it soon enough." He stepped toward her, fists clenched. "Isabella, don't test me. I've had enough of your games." Her lips curved into a mirthless grin. "Likewise. We can talk about it in the morning. Good night, Ryan." Without another word, she walked into the bedroom and locked the door. Her heart pounded against her chest as she leaned against the wall. She could almost taste Ryan's fury in the air. Tomorrow, everything would change. And for once, Isabella Warren was ready. Dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, painting the city in shades of gold. Yet the serenity outside was no reflection of the chaos inside the Warren penthouse. Isabella woke early, a flurry of emotions coursing through her. She dressed carefully in a crisp white blouse and a fitted black skirt that accommodated her growing belly. Today, she would face the consequences of her bold move. By the time she stepped into the living room, Ryan was already on the phone, his voice raised, tension etched into every line of his face. On the table, an iPad displayed the morning's financial headlines. Breaking: new private equity fund acquires majority stake in Anderson Tech from Warren and Moore. Shocking coup: anonymous buyer snaps up Anderson Tech. Ryan ended the call with a hiss. He spun around to face Isabella. "Do you have any idea what's going on?" he demanded, eyes blazing. "Someone orchestrated a hostile buyout of Anderson Tech overnight. It's all over the news. Our board is going insane." She calmly sipped a glass of orange juice, savoring the moment. "I might have an idea," she replied, her tone measured. Confusion twisted Ryan's features. "What do you mean?" She set down her glass, meeting his gaze squarely. "It was me," she said simply. His jaw dropped. "You? That's impossible. You don't have the resources. You don't have the—" He broke off, realization dawning. "You used your connections. You've been scheming behind my back." Isabella stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "Call it what you want. I invested in a private equity fund that recognized the value of Anderson Tech, something you've taken for granted for years. The deal is done, Ryan. I control Anderson Tech now." He inhaled sharply, color flushing his cheeks. "You can't do this. This is sabotage, betrayal. Is it any worse than what you did to me?" Isabella snapped, her composure wavering under the weight of pent-up anger. "You humiliated me in public, you flaunted your mistress everywhere, and you disrespected me at every turn. You left me no choice but to protect myself." Ryan's eyes flickered with a mixture of fury and shock. He attempted to regain control. "We'll see about that. My lawyers will tear this deal apart. I'll prove you manipulated the board." "Go ahead," Isabella interrupted, her voice rising. "Check the legal documents, the funding sources, everything. It's airtight. Even if you wanted to sue me personally, you'd have to face the entire private equity consortium behind me. You might be good, Ryan, but you're not that good." He raked a hand through his hair, glancing down at her pregnant belly. "So this is your revenge?" A wry smile tugged at her lips. "This is my defense. Consider it a wake-up call. You once said I was boring. Well, I guess you were wrong." A thick silence fell between them. Ryan's breathing was ragged, as if he'd just run a marathon. "What do you want?" he finally asked, desperation tainting his voice. Isabella leaned back against the couch. "I want you to learn that you can't treat people like disposable accessories. That includes me, and most importantly, our child. If you plan to continue down your current path, risky deals, public scandals, humiliating me, don't expect me to stand by and watch." With that, she left him standing there, the echo of her words hanging in the air. For once, Ryan Warren, the unstoppable millionaire, seemed at a complete loss. And Isabella felt a rush of fierce satisfaction, even amidst the uncertainty of what lay ahead. In the days that followed, the shockwaves of Isabella's coup reverberated through New York's business and social circles. Reporters clamored for interviews, rumors circulated about the future of Warren and Moore, and some even speculated about the state of the Warrens' marriage. But Isabella maintained her poise, refusing to comment publicly. She directed inquiries to the private equity fund spokesperson, who skillfully spun the narrative of a forward-thinking acquisition. Ryan, meanwhile, retreated. He cancelled public appearances, avoided hosting his usual lavish parties, and tried unsuccessfully to undo the Anderson Tech deal. Legal teams from both sides clashed, but the contract was bulletproof. Thomas Patterson and his associates had prepared meticulously, ensuring Ryan had no legitimate grounds to challenge it. Genevieve Santorini, for her part, vanished from the spotlight. Rumors suggested that when Ryan's empire showed signs of vulnerability, her affections cooled. She was last spotted boarding a flight to Europe. Isabella felt neither pity nor satisfaction. Genevieve was merely a symptom of Ryan's disregard. The real victory was in asserting her own worth. As the weeks turned into a month, Isabella found herself at the helm of Anderson Tech's transition. She worked closely with a team of engineers, finance experts, and project managers to set new strategies in motion, enhanced data protection services, expansions into new markets. Her baby bump had grown, and though it was challenging to juggle late-night meetings and pregnancy fatigue, she felt invigorated by her purpose. Not everything was smooth. Ryan attempted to freeze her personal accounts, only to discover she had already transferred essential funds. He threatened to remove her from the penthouse, but she calmly reminded him it was partially in her name. Their confrontations were fierce, but Isabella stood firm, always reminding him that any ruthless move on his part would spark an equally potent response. In time, something shifted in Ryan. His anger cooled into a somber acceptance. One afternoon, he arrived at Anderson Tech's new office unannounced. Isabella watched him step into the sleek conference room, the city skyline behind him. There was no arrogance in his posture this time, only weariness. "Isabella," he said, voice subdued, "we need to talk." She nodded, motioning for him to sit. They faced each other across the conference table, the weight of years between them. For a moment, he looked like the young man she'd met at Harvard, a spark of regret in his eyes. "I realize I messed up," he began quietly. "I let my ambition and ego push you away. I never saw you as an equal, even though you always had the potential. And I'm sorry." She studied his face, trying to discern sincerity. A large part of her wanted to hold on to her rage, to remind him of every transgression. But another part, perhaps the part that once loved him, felt the strain of exhaustion. She said nothing, allowing him to continue. "I can't take back what I did," he added, "but I'd like to find a new balance. For the sake of our child, if nothing else." Isabella drew a slow breath. "I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were. And honestly, I don't think I want to." Ryan nodded, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I understand, but maybe we can move forward in some way. Even if we're not together as husband and wife, we can be partners in ensuring our child's future." She considered his words. There was so much water under the bridge, so many broken vows. Yet, she recognized this might be the start of a more respectful dynamic. "I'm willing to talk about an arrangement," she said softly. "For the baby's sake." Their conversation stretched on, moving from apologies to logistical details of co-parenting, finances and boundaries. By the end, Isabella felt a cautious sense of relief. She wasn't naive enough to trust Ryan completely, but perhaps they could cooperate without hostility. A week later, she served him with legal separation papers, clarifying her intention to raise the child on her own terms. Ryan signed them, albeit reluctantly. The media quickly caught wind of the separation, but Isabella kept her composure. She had a new life blossoming inside her and a new empire to build. She no longer needed Ryan's validation. As her due date approached, she stood on the balcony of the Anderson Tech building, overlooking the city. The wind played with her hair, and she placed a hand over her belly, thinking of the incredible journey that had brought her here. She was no longer the naive girl overshadowed by a powerful husband. She was Isabella Warren, businesswoman, soon to be mother, and a force in her own right. And so ends the unforgettable story of a woman scorned, who refused to accept a fate of complacency. Isabella Warren turned the tables on her unfaithful, condescending husband in the most dramatic way possible by seizing control of a prized piece of his business empire overnight. Her transformation was not just a tale of revenge. It was a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to her unborn child's future. Though the road ahead promised challenges, co-parenting arrangements, media scrutiny, and corporate battles, Isabella embarked on it with renewed confidence and hard-earned independence. Call to action.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous. Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal. Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home-wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly. The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her key card didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs, Marcus warned. But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal. It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached, CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections, Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not." Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation. Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan. Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. You'll regret this, he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. And you made a fool of me in front of everyone. Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. You did that to yourself, she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Hartridge said. I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down. With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team. Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. How can I help you? Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up. Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. You're investigating her? A slow exhale from the other end. Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas. Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that. Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. Isn't that something your legal team handles? A rueful laugh. Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill two birds with one stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce. Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. I'll do what I can, Elizabeth replied cautiously. But how do I communicate with you about this? Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. And one more thing, Elizabeth Patricia said, before hanging up. People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful. Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. Keep digging, she urged, and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details. Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. That's strange, Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. Why would he agree so easily? Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board. But Michelle wasn't convinced. I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know. The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. We need to talk, face to face. She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. Liz? He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. You think? He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle. Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. Amicably. Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture? Jordan's shoulders tensed, This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney. She's manipulative, Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation. Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure." He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes if it comes to that. Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers." "Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. "Have we sent this to the SEC?" "Not yet," the advisor responded. "We wanted to confront them first." Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. "No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars," Hartridge asked. "And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation." Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. "Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby," he announced quietly. "Thank you," Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. "I believe we might need you." Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. "David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust." Hartridge's face remained stony. "I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability." Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. "You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on." Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. "Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability." Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. "Stand down, sir," the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. "Let him go." "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Miss Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country, perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature, Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future. If you found this story gripping, insightful, or inspiring, we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with friends who need a reminder that courage can emerge from chaos, and subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering tales. Let Elizabeth's story serve as a beacon, no matter how ruthless the betrayal. There's always a path to reclaim your power and build a brighter tomorrow. You too can rise like a phoenix.